Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Liberty Weekly podcast. I'm your host, as always, Patrick McFarlane. This one is episode number 160, and the show notes may be found at libertyweekly.net/160. Also, the Liberty Weekly podcast is featured at the Libertarian Institute at libertarianinstitute.org, alongside podcasts by, of course, Scott Horton, Keith Knight, Kyle Anzalone, Pete Quinones, and Tommy Salmons. And for this episode, I'm going to be talking, this might be a little bit shorter one, but I'm going to be talking about Lew Rockwell, and I'm going to be talking about the left, the right, and the state. And I did cover Lew Rockwell, his article, Declaration Confusion, and that got really good reception on the podcast. And I'm just going to pull that one up and put that in the show notes page because that was a really good one. So today I'm going to be talking about his article, The United Front Against Liberty. And I think I might go just a little bit deeper into it to the next article in the book, The Left, the Right, and the State. But so Lew Rockwell's Declaration Confusion, I covered that in episode 119. So you can find that /119. But for this one, we're going to go, we're going to get into it. And I think there's a lot of good messages that Lew Rockwell has here, especially for the time that we're going through. So he says, defenders of liberty are prone to despair, perhaps always and certainly since the end of the 18th century, when the hopes of the last Enlightenment generation were dashed as the French Revolution descended into tyranny and war, and the American Revolution was betrayed by a centralizing coup against the Articles of Confederation. Then, as now, the evidence that our side was losing the battle seemed overwhelming. Old-style liberalism lost defenders, not because the idea of a free society was false, but because the cause seemed hopeless. And so it is in our time, when wars and party politics are forever on attack against the individual and the common good. There is nothing incompatible about the two. That's just the first page, but this was written in December 2001, so just think about what had happened in the last 4 months before December 2001 and how quickly things kind of were spiraling. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this article today was just because, everything happening in the last year. Of course, we have the COVID-19 pandemic. We have talk of vaccine passports. We just have, this heightened rhetoric between China and the United States, the Western powers and China. And we have, of course, the crackdown on civil liberties. We have talk of gun control happening with the shooting in Boulder, Colorado last week. And it can get pretty disheartening to be a libertarian during this time. And I know that Dave Smith has talked about on Part of the Problem, he was mentioning that libertarianism was declared dead when the pandemic started because the general consensus, I don't know how this consensus came about, but the general consensus all of a sudden emerged that, libertarianism doesn't have an answer for this situation, which, of course, it does. Moreover, the answer is that the answer should not be handled by a monopolistic organization with a monopoly over the use of force. For this situation, a one-size-fits-all solution is not one that can necessarily be adaptive or work for a pandemic-type situation. So, no one ever asked us, but everyone just kind of assumed, libertarianism doesn't have an answer for this, because the answer is obviously lockdowns and mask mandates and broad carte blanche authoritarianism. So obviously that's the right answer. So let's go a little bit further. The mistake is to believe that somehow our efforts are in vain, that liberty stands no chance in the battle of ideas, that the situation would not be even worse without our efforts. This is precisely what the enemies of liberty seek. So libertarians must be the last to grant them satisfaction. Adhere to principle, even if only to bug those who hate you for your principles. And I think this is incredibly prescient in our time, of course, with the COVID-19 situation. But everything else, times are tough right now. Times are going to get even worse. And obviously, our voices are needed even more desperately now than at any other time. And I've often talked about on my show how wonderful I think it is that the libertarian podcasting scene has exploded. Not just the podcasting scene. I think the fact that the libertarian podcasting scene has exploded is actually an effect of libertarian ideas getting a lot of traction. Specifically, the Austro-libertarian anarcho-capitalist tradition under Rothbard and Mises. And this is, I mean, take it with a grain of salt that this is completely anecdotal. But my personal experience is just that, you know, I've been doing my show since, I don't know, 2017. And in that time, I've seen podcasts come and go, but I've seen a lot of podcasts come and go. And I think that when the podcasts come, there's reasons for them going that aren't necessarily tied to people not believing in the ideas anymore. It's just, you know, life gets busy. Maybe you didn't quite get the reaction that you wanted, or you kind of fall out of that, you know, maybe it was a phase or something like that. But that being said, there are a lot of podcasts that have come and stayed, and there are also people who have taken breaks, people who have come back. And I think just the amount of new libertarians that are coming out with podcasts, I think, is incredible. And I've been able to meet a lot of them and get to know them, and it's wonderful, like on Twitter and all that stuff. But I think that, just anecdotally speaking, of course, the scene has just exploded. There's so many people on social media who seem like they're new libertarians. I meet people who are new libertarians all the time. And I think that, you know, I have talked about the Libertarian Golden Age, and I wrote about that on my Substack, so I'll try to link that in the show notes page. But I really do think, so think about the time that Lew Rockwell wrote this article. And it was just after September 11th happened. Things were starting to go downhill. The surveillance, the broad scope surveillance state and warfare state was really at least coming out in the open. I mean, those of us who have read Scott Horton's Enough already, we know that, of course, U.S. interventionism in the Middle East had been going on far, far, far in advance of September 11th. However, this was the point where the empire really started to take, not to take shape, but to really come out in the open and become unmasked. And not only that, but you had people that were really going along with it and not questioning it. And at that time, of course, I wasn't part of this movement at that time. I was 7 years old, 8 years old. But that was before the Ron Paul revolution. And I would have to think that the libertarian movement was maybe an eighth of the size that it is today. We've all, heard the talk about how, back, I don't know if it was in the 60s and 70s, but the number of libertarians that were real libertarians could fit in a room with Murray Rothbard, and it was maybe 8 people. I mean, now look at this. You have people all over Twitter. You have, admittedly more podcasts that I follow and that I'm subscribed to than I could possibly have any time to listen to and consume, much less produce my own content. But that is a wonderful, wonderful problem to have. And so I guess in this episode, I wanted to be able to provide a bit of a white pill to folks. Not that, it's springtime, things are going all right, but worrisome things are happening. Of course, the gun control rhetoric after Boulder, Colorado happened, but the actual introduction of Biden's gun control bills, and I just saw an article today about vaccine passports in the Biden administration talking about them, and not just the fact that Biden can't answer a sentence, but he can't have one press conference, which, I mean, it's precedent. The president is just a figurehead anyways, and the main policy goals keep happening. The main ones that are important, that the powers that shouldn't be have in place, they keep marching forward at a sickening pace, and I think that pace is moving more and more rapidly. But more than that, I wanted to think about, let's read a little bit more, and I think it's going to come up here. Nonetheless, a crisis on the current scale always reduces our ranks. Because of this thinking, in every generation, the idea of liberty must be reasserted by those with the vision to see through the fog and rediscovered by the young and courageous. And that's what we need. We need young, well, not just young people, but we need courage is what we need. Most men are accessible to new ideas only in their youth, wrote Mises. With the progress of age, the ability to welcome them diminishes. This is why we put so much of our efforts into education. Only victory in the battle of ideas will secure a future of freedom. Just as the prevalence of murder and theft is not a reason to abandon the fifth and seventh commandments, so the constant tendency of the state to grow provides no reason to jettison the libertarian ideal. After a murder, we don't say, that's it, making the case against murder is hopeless. No, we see the violation of the moral rule as evidence for the need to constantly reassert the right to life. So it is with liberty. Without the state, there would be no need to constantly push for the right to freedom. So does the libertarian movement need the state? Well, of course, no. That because the state will always exist, or the force and pressure to create a state will always exist. So therefore, we must be ever vigilant against it. But discouragement is not the only reason people abandon the cause of freedom. Often, people just get tired of being attacked for holding the very unpopular view that liberty offers a better way. And of course, everyone sees that every single day. Well, if you're a libertarian, you get in those situations where, should I say something? Should I just keep my mouth shut? I hear these people talking about X, Y, and Z. I don't want them to think that I'm weird. Or, you can just own it and be like, yeah, I'm an anarchist. I think all this is immoral, The criticisms can be brutal, but they are no different in character from what they have always been. The fundamental tactic is to question our motives, and to disparage our cause is only another special interest. By exposing the supposed malice behind the motive, they believe they have made their case. Then he goes on to say, this year alone, the Mises Institute has been accused of being on the wrong side of many political fashions. It has been charged with standing up for price gougers and profiteers, promoting the interests of large corporations and monopolists, currying favor with the Chinese, the Iraqis, and the Taliban, providing an intellectual cover for racists and, quote, neo-Confederates, working as a shill for Wall Street, justifying moral deviancy, favoring pollution, signing up with the Christian right, having our heads in the clouds, putting our heads in the sand, and of being in the pay of big banks and multinationals, among 1,000 other claims. I love this because notice how contradictory these claims are. And I think this is a symptom of sticking with your principle and not sacrificing those principles. For instance, I have covered the Chinese Uyghur genocide accusations in recently, and I'm hoping to publish a large expose that I've penned at the Libertarian Institute at libertarianinstitute.org, and that will be hopefully dropping by the end of this week. I have my first draft together, but I've done a deep dive for you guys. I know that I've talked about it on the podcast a few times. I hope it's not getting stale, but the reason why I am insistent is because this is an incredibly, incredibly important issue. And just as an aside, this confrontation between China and this new axis of evil, which is, I believe, China, Iran, North Korea, and there's a few other ones in there, and the Western powers. I think it's going to be I think it's obvious that it's the new Cold War, and that it's going to escalate, or at least the rhetoric is, and in the same way that China's the boogeyman that Russia was, that the USSR was during the last century, the later half of the last century, I think that's going to be escalating. It's this delicate balance, and I'm going to talk about this in the article just a little bit, but it's a delicate balance because people in the libertarian sphere hate communists so much and hate communism so much. And that's granted, it's a murderous ideology, but they hate it so much that they're willing to believe anything unquestioningly. And I'm not perfect. In the past, if you've listened to the show for a long time, I can be wrong about things. Of course, all of us can. And I just try to, as I'm doing this and as I'm writing editorials or touching a topic like the Chinese Uyghur genocide claims, I want to try and be humble, of course, because I'm not an expert in these situations, but look into it and provide the ability for people to look into it themselves and make up their own minds. And in this expose, I've gone through and I've linked, I would say, I don't know, 60 different sources for this. And so I'd really like people to take a look at it. But if you are really, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here, and I hope it doesn't come off that way, but I'm saying that if you are truly principled, if you are truly anti-war, you have to be able to examine things like this that are controversial topics that could incense a lot of scorn and hatred and anger, whereas everyone and their mother is saying that the Chinese government is committing genocide against the Uyghur Muslims. It's a foregone conclusion, and you're a communist sympathizer and you're a bastard if you don't agree, if you don't all of a sudden take it or accept it as fact. You look at it critically and you say, oh, well, actually, there's all these things that cast huge doubt on this claim. Then you're simping for China, or you're a shill or something like that. And, for the most part, when I've engaged people in the libertarian community, they see the points and they'll, I'm not necessarily talking about libertarians. I'm just saying they see the point, they understand it, they look at the materials and they say, oh, well, there's, there's, you have a point. It's not it casts doubt on the official claim. And when you see the actors behind it, it's like, oh, well, there's something squirrely going on here, and it's not the Chinese genocide. The accusation. It's not the Chinese committing genocide. It's the accusations that are squirrely. But I'm talking mostly about people outside the libertarian sphere, mostly, conservatives, folks like that, but even liberals who think that the Chinese are committing genocide. I guess the overall point is that it's a hard thing to talk about, and we need to squarely place the burden of proof on the people who would say that genocide is being committed. And I think we can extrapolate this. I'm using this as an example for what Lew Rockwell is trying to say here. It is hard to be a libertarian, but why should it be hard to be a libertarian? Because we are not the ones who would advocate for a system that legitimizes the use of violence on peaceful people. So, on the one hand, we should be sick and tired of being on the defensive all the time. We should not be apologists for our point of view, even though the social climate in the United States would put us in that position, or the social climate just in general would put us in that position. And I don't think we have to be assholes about it or be self-righteous snobs, but just be reticent and resolute in the fact that we are not the ones advocating for the system. The burden of proof is not on us. The burden of proof should not be on us to say that there's another way, because we are not the ones who would advocate or justify a centralized, coercive state. So we should not be apologists for our point of view. We should not worry about these claims, these slurs against us. I mean, I'll read them again. This year alone, the Mises Institute has been accused of being on the wrong side of many political fashions. It has been charged with standing up for price gougers and profiteers, promoting the interests of large corporations and monopolists, currying favor with the Chinese, the Iraqis, and the Taliban, providing an intellectual cover for racists and neo-Confederates, working as a shill for Wall Street, justifying moral deviancy, favoring pollution, signing up with the Christian right, having our heads in the clouds, putting our heads in the sand, and of being on the pay of big banks and multinationals, among 1,000 other claims. So how did this turn out? I mean, specifically, so demonstrably so, being accused of currying favor with the Chinese, the Iraqis, and the Taliban. How did that turn out? How did that turn out? So, in the same way that the Mises Institute was criticized for, as supporting Iraq and the Taliban at that period of time, we are on the right side of that. We are so clearly on the right side of that issue. And look what happened. So the burden of proof is not on us, because we are not, I mean, specifically as it applies to this, the claims that we need to go and invade or that we need to intervene or do something. There's several other examples in this piece. The burden of proof is not on us for that. Screw you. And I think that libertarians, Dave Smith has talked about this, and of course Drew Hancock has talked about this on his YouTube channel, that we should not be apologists for having these radical principles. And we need to be courageous and brave. I think that we need to be courageous and brave with our messaging. And I think the Mises Caucus is doing that. But they're not the only ones that are doing that. There are several libertarians that are not doing that, I'll tell you that. But I'm not here to point fingers and cause division. I'm here to try and inspire and talk about this message that Lew Rockwell put forth in 2001. And again, I mean, think of the place that Lew and Ron Paul and the Mises Institute and everyone was in at that time. Talk about not really having much hope, seeing what happens, seeing everything go downhill in 2001, and seeing, at least at the end in 2008 and 2009, seeing the housing market crash, and constantly thinking that, oh, the big crash is coming, the big crash is coming. But then all of a sudden, that electric spark of the Ron Paul moment, and how exciting that must have been. But then, even so, the crash that came after that is, I remember it because I came into Young Americans for Liberty at the University of Minnesota in 2012 after the Ron Paul moment. And the Young Americans for Liberty chapter, they were talking about how before I came, they had a meeting space, a meeting room, but there were so many people that came to each meeting that they couldn't fit them all in the room. And when I came in, there were 4 or 5 people that came up to regularly to meetings. How demoralizing could that be? So, and even back then, the number of people, I'm not an OG or anything, but the number of people that were reading Rothbard and had known of Rothbard were a lot less than it is now. And I think, I don't know. If anything, I think that that's a wonderful sign that these ideas are so compelling that they are growing. Of course, the internet has made it so that we can reach out to everyone. That I can be sitting in my basement in Wisconsin and speaking to lots and lots of people and people around the world and in real time. I mean, there's so much to say about that, but the amount of people who anecdotally I've seen who have said, oh, I wasn't a libertarian, but then I listened to Tom Woods or Dave Smith, or I listened to your show, or I listened to Pete Quinones, or I found Scott Horton, or, the list goes on, or I found the Mises Institute through a lecture or something like that. And it's exciting. And, that should speak for itself. So as we go here, let's just finish up this article. This year alone, the Mises Institute has been accused of being on the wrong side of many I read that already. LewRockwell.com has been similarly charged with every manner of treachery. I've received many ominous emails, some even threatening death. Every angry correspondent seems to believe that he has discovered my special interest, which includes all of the above plus a few more, like being in the pay of drug merchants, stumping for ultramontanus. I'm afraid I don't know how to pronounce that. And providing cover for the Jews. I've left out many accusations because they become tedious after a while. The accusations have about as much substance as those of the 1930s Marxists, who believed that winning arguments was all about exposing your opponents as apologists for capital. It is a dishonest tactic that stems from a sincere belief that nobody could possibly be involved in political commentary without a secret desire to reward some group at the expense of everyone else. Exposing this interest, the Marxists believed, is identical to undermining the credibility of the argument. But liberty is not the demand of a special interest. It is a plea for the good of the entire society. This makes it unique in politics. Think of the debate over the stimulus package. One side wanted special breaks to help the capital sector, combined with subsidies for the same. The other side wanted special breaks for the working class, combined with subsidies for the poor. These two sides, the only ones involved in the debate, fought it out for months before reaching an impasse. This should not surprise us. Mises wrote in 1927 that the origin of all modern political parties and ideologies represents a reaction to the claim of old liberalism, that no group should be allotted a privileged legal status. The ideologies then were socialism and fascism, and each rejected the liberal idea. Today the options are more insidiously respectable. Left and right social democracy, but no more compatible with the old liberal ideal. The true friends of freedom, the ones who believe in it as a matter of hardcore principle, are always few. We have been reminded of this in recent days. The much vaunted civil libertarians of the left can be counted on to defend the rights of every anti-bourgeois segment of society, except when that segment crosses the state to which the left owes its primary loyalty. Thus did these civil libertarians recently see the light on the need to censor and spy on anything the state deems politically deviant. So too with the political right, which sponsors and promotes treatises on the need for traditional morality, and isn't at all troubled when the state murders thousands of innocents in the course of a war. I think this is kind of emblematic of how the left and the right kind of switch sides. At least like in the 90s, the left was the ones who supported tolerance, especially as it came to, I'm just thinking of violent video games or heavy metal music or something like that. And the right was the side that was opposed to those things. And now that's totally flopped, is that people on the right are the people that believe in, free speech as it comes to media, and people on the left aren't. Through it all, the libertarian theme has been the same: liberty for everyone, state privileges for no one. This is a message that no faction within the apparatus of the ruling class wants to hear. No matter how divided the factions are among themselves, they form a united front against the libertarian idea, which is the one thing they find most intolerable. All members of the ruling class, as well as their intellectuals and wannabes, are pleased to see any rhetorical weapon used against us. There are two reasons for this: intellectual and political. So before we get into that, I just want to take a quick break here to tell you how you can support this content. And that is your one-stop shop at libertyweekly.net/support. You can help support me on Subscribestar, through Patreon, and through Float, float.app. And you can subscribe and get Patreon bonuses for cryptocurrency. So if you'd like to do that, that's always available to you. Also at /support are my cryptocurrency wallet addresses, and you can browse the various ones. Bitcoin Cash. I think Bitcoin Cash is in there. Anyways, there's Litecoin, Cardano, ADA, and there's a bunch of other things. So you can support me there. Also at libertyweekly.net/Odyssey, ODYSEE. You can follow me there. It's the YouTube revolution, basically a total YouTube replacement that runs on cryptocurrency, made by Free State Project folks. check me out there. I release exclusive content there that you can find nowhere else. It doesn't appear in a podcast feed. It doesn't appear on my website even. It doesn't appear on YouTube or BitChute. It's just on Odyssey. You can follow me there. I was releasing videos every single day on there. And through the website, you can earn cryptocurrency library credits for free and help support my content at no cost to you. You just earn the crypto through the website. And I leave it on the videos because when you donate cryptocurrency to videos or a channel, it will signal to everyone else in the network that that content should be viewed more. So my content will be suggested more. Instead of YouTube's clandestine algorithm and censorship-laden protocol, with Library and Odyssey, you can donate your cryptocurrency to a certain channel, and that is a way of directly empowering the people that you view. So you can check me out there. I'm going to hopefully publish this editorial I was talking about. You can find that at libertyweekly.net/China, or just go to libertarianinstitute.org and it will be appearing there. And free ways you can help support this content: share, comment, like, review my podcast. I'll read the review on air just during this segment. And tell a friend, those kind of things. I really do appreciate that. Interact with my social media posts and say hi. So anyways, that's all the ways that you can help support this content. Now back to the show. So there are two reasons that they can use this So all members of the ruling class, as well as their intellectuals and wannabes, are pleased to see any rhetorical weapon used against us. There are two reasons that they are pleased. They are an intellectual reason and a political reason. Intellectually, our contemporaries cannot conceive of a movement that seeks not the triumph of a special interest, but only the common good. They simply cannot believe that anyone who doesn't have some axe to grind would be involved in intellectual affairs. Idealism, they think, belongs in monasteries and not public affairs. And I think this is projection. I think it's intellectual projection because... maybe not, because, if you think about it, a lot of people believe that they are the ones who are advocating the public good. Because in my heart, I truly don't think that the average person wants ill. I really don't. I mean, aside from the fact that I'm known as a little bit of a conspiracy theorist, I think, you're talking about a small percentage of the population. But generally, people are good intentioned. I don't think that the average person thinks that everyone else is good intentioned, and maybe that's why, if we're looking at the article here, maybe that's why they can't conceive of someone that doesn't really have a special interest. I do think that the majority of people are naive and they end up being useful idiots. I guess I'm not exempt from that classification. I don't want to be so narcissistic to think that I'm not, or so hubristic to think that I'm not. However, most people, in maybe you agree or don't agree with this, but I think most people are good intentioned. They want prosperity for the most amount of people. I mean, maybe you can't say that about the left, but they're generally good-hearted, even though they don't believe that other people are. Because if you really get down to it and talk to someone, like, you can find common ground with them. And that's not to say everyone is 100% pure as the driven snow. But generally speaking, when you really get down to what it is that they just want people to be okay and to be able to live their lives for the most part. And maybe I'm being naive here, I don't know. But they don't want to believe that other people are that way. And maybe it's just that these other people are, I don't know, these other people are useful idiots or what have you. That's just generally what I think. But I think it is true what Lew Rockwell says. They simply cannot believe that anyone who doesn't have some axe to grind would be involved in intellectual affairs. So the second reason he says, discussed often in the work of Murray Rothbard, is political. The triumph of liberty against power would undermine their own special interests, so they fight this prospect with everything that they have. And maybe what Lew is referring to is people actually involved in the arena of politics and public policy, and not necessarily your average man on the street who doesn't really concern themselves with politics like us, autistic libertarians. So, but that's certainly true, is that people involved in public policy have their own special interests or things that pay the bills. And maybe it can be as simple as that. It's not necessarily that they, in their head, are malicious, have malicious intent, and know that, oh, my special interest is big banks. And here maybe I'm being the naive one, but you think that Alan Greenspan or Ben Bernanke, when they get up there, they're thinking actively like, oh, what can I do today in this meeting, this testimony in front of the Senate? What can I do to advance the interests of the special banks? Maybe I should lie here, or maybe I should lie there. No, what I think they're really thinking is probably, oh man, if I say this, I'm going to lose this this deal that I have under the table from J.P. Morgan, or Chase won't renew whatever with me if I don't advocate this specific policy. And maybe that's a distinction without a difference that I just made, is that they're not sitting there like little goblins with their hands, like little hobgoblins being like, oh, death and destruction and death and despair, I'm just going to corrupt everything. It's just the practicality of, oh, well, I'd like to buy this house or this estate this year, so I better do what I need to do so that JP Morgan Chase will pay me, or get my client the best policy passed, or my handlers tell me that, for instance, like this, Justin Amash went on with Michael Malice and was talking about how, everyone has their marching orders and that everything is really controlled by the political leadership. And it's not necessarily that, they're sitting down with members of JP Morgan Chase and JP Morgan Chase tells them that you have to vote XYZ on this. It's that, oh, well, the leadership of the party says we're voting this way on this issue, so I'm going to do that because I want to get reelected. And they don't really think all those things through. It's just about self-preservation. And unfortunately, the incentives that are lined up in the system, that's what they go to. That's what the incentives promote. Not critical thinking on issues and actually advocating for principles or a cause, but tapping into that self-preservation. So he says, continues, in times of crisis in particular, we are reminded of just how unified the ruling class is and how it is willing to put aside internal bickering for the sake of preserving power and its ability to shuffle wealth around. This is why, for example, after September 11th, the ruling class was so united in its call for war. Nothing solidifies power against liberty like a war, and the state never misses a chance to use events to confirm moral legitimacy on what it would like to do anyways. There were many horrible aspects to September 11th, but that it seemed to provide a rationale for the dramatic expansion of the state for its killing and looting is the one least questioned. I think that's very true. And you could say the same about COVID-19 situation. Exact same. Just plug in COVID-19 in place of September 11th. And there's another reason that, there's always been a reason that this has been framed from the very outset. And I wish I had the video clip to pull up and play, but the very outset, when the World Health Organization had their first press conference where they said that they were going to name it COVID-19, that guy said that we're fighting a war against this. It was the first thing that was mentioned. They named it, and then they declared war on it. So, to sign up with the Party of Liberty is to take a principled step. It means rejecting the dominant strain of politics of our time. What is that strain? That the state ought to be used to promote the agenda of some special interest, whether it be those who benefit from welfare, regulation, inflation, war, or the consolidation of the police state generally. The Party of Liberty rejects all of this, not because we have a special interest, but because we stick by the most unpopular claim of all, that society ought to be organized so that it benefits everyone in the long run. There's only one system that does so, and that is the natural order of liberty. That's why we believe in it, and why we will neither give up the ideal nor yield the slightest in the face of attacks. So I'm not going to go on to the next one. I thought I might be able to. But again, this article It appears in The Left, the Right, and the State, and it's entitled The United Front Against Liberty by Lew Rockwell. I think it's wonderful, and I think a testament to its validity is the fact that he wrote it in 2001, and at that time things were pretty bleak, right? Well, if he would have known then what he knows now, seeing how many kids come to Mises U, seeing the reach of someone like Tom Woods, seeing the reach of Dave Smith, someone who's been able to be on Fox with Kennedy, and be exposed to millions of different people, whether it's been on Joe Rogan or Fox, or with his stand-up. Tom Woods reaching tons of people with his videos and his podcasts, and all of the people that they would inspire. Ron Paul, the Ron Paul moment hadn't happened, and all the people that they would inspire, and all the kids who would grow up and be libertarians and have children, and generally just becoming part of the remnant, being able to spread these ideas and it being cool. I mean, so it's a testament to the fact that this principled libertarian message is the way to go, because look at the movement that it inspired, not just the Ron Paul movement. And I understand that there were things about it, people joining the movement who weren't part of the remnant, and kind of the hangover after the high. But now we're still chugging. Things are bad, just generally, like with the state of the world and our descent into tyranny. But trying to give a white pill here, there's a lot of great people we've got to know online. There's a huge community here. Of course, it's not without its problems, but we're here, we're principled, and the principled message worked for Lew Rockwell and the Mises Institute, and it worked for Ron Paul. And we're here discussing this, and we're facing a dark time. We're facing a time that was dark, just like September 11th was, and all the things that were happening after that. There was a crisis, and now we're going through the subsuming of liberty. In turn, the state is subsuming liberty and just eating up that area, and imposing its will and cracking down and coming up with some really scary stuff in the future and in the near future. And I think that we just need to stick to our guns, stay principled, no matter how unpopular it is, and be bold and say, no, the burden of proof is not on me here, and reject people who would try and force the burden of proof. Like, oh, you advocate for anarchy? Well, solve every problem of the human condition right now. And moreover, more practically and more importantly, especially as it comes to war and this rhetoric, whether it's against China or whether it's against Iran or anyone who would build up these tensions or advocate for war. No, in the past, as it pertained to the war in Iraq and against Gaddafi and Libya and all these different interventionisms that we've been in, they cry foul and then berate you when you don't go along, when you have a critical eye towards the lies that they're spewing. And then only later does the retraction, if the retraction comes, but the truth outs, and it turns out that it was all bullshit the whole time. So don't sacrifice that principle, and don't sacrifice being courageous, because it's definitely what is needed right now, and it will serve us well in the long run. So I don't talk too much about strategy. I try just to cover the ideas and history and things that I find interesting, and to connect with other people, and to provide culture in a way with everyone, but to tell human stories and to share this experience of being a libertarian, and what a huge mind-blowing experience it is. But I think it's exciting to be in the movement. I think it's exciting to be courageous and principled. I think it's a bit dangerous, and I think that makes it even more exciting. But I think that we should take pride in this, not to be arrogant or anything like that. But let's keep trucking on, and let's make this awesome, and let's produce content and create liberty and network with each other, and not be afraid or ashamed, and not apologize. And I think that's where real success lies. So I'll leave it there. Show notes for this one is at libertyweekly.net/160. I wonder when I'll get to 200. Maybe I should plan something fun. But anyways, okay, well, take care. Have a great week, and I'll be back. Keep an eye out for that editorial. I'll share it on socials, and if you follow me, you can find it usually at Liberty Weekly everywhere. So, all right, thanks, everyone. Take care. Peace.